Hi, and welcome to the Power Hungry Podcast. I'm Robert Bryce. On this podcast, we talk about energy, power, innovation, and politics. And my guest today is Scott Angelle. He is the former director of the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement at the Department of the Interior. He served in that position from 2017 to 2021. Scott, welcome to the Power Hungry Podcast.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's great to join you, and thank you for the great work you're doing across America.
Well, thank you. So I warned you I have my guests introduce themselves. So imagine you've arrived at Crawdad Boyle or what, something, and you don't know anyone there. You got 45 seconds or 60 seconds to introduce yourself. Go ahead and tell me who you are.
Yeah, so I would say that I'm a country boy from the great state of Louisiana, the 18th great state of the Union that absolutely believes that energy matters. I've dedicated my career to advancing energy causes. I certainly believe that energy has been one of the things that has made America really, really strong after World War II. I have served in a variety of positions, including local government, state government, and federal government, keeping my eye on the ball and knowing that taxpayers deserve the kind of service that we would all be proud of. So we've kept our nose clean, we've done good work, and now we're trying to do additional good work.
All right, fair enough. Now, and you're a native of Lafayette, is that right?
Actually, a little town right out of Lafayette called Breaux Bridge, which is about 6 miles from Lafayette. Certainly went to school in Lafayette, entertained in Lafayette, shopped in Lafayette, retailed in Lafayette, and certainly Louisiana is a great, great place, and Lafayette is one of those great places.
Well, okay, so now I remember Mulots. Breaux Bridge is famous for Mulots, right? It's the most famous restaurant on Breaux Bridge, isn't it?
Right down the road, actually, right down the road from Lafayette. That's right.
Yeah, I've been there. So you were at the in the Department of Interior at the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, and your purview was offshore safety and mainly in oil and gas in the Gulf of Mexico. Is that right?
Right. So we actually have three parts of our mission. Congress has given us three parts of our mission. One of them is safety, one of them is environmental enforcement, and the other one is conservation of resources to make sure that we don't waste the resources. So conservation of resources in oil and gas is made to be understood as production. So we were proud that in 2019, we had the highest production we ever had in the history of offshore America in 2019. Our safety record has been improving every year. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics now says that for several years, offshore is the safest second high hazard industry in America, second only to nuclear power generation. So a lot of good things. And of course, on the environmental side, just incredible efforts since the Macondo event. So we're proud of what happened during our service there.
So in Deepwater Horizon, I remember it well because it came out right as my fourth book was coming out, Power Hungry. This was April of 2010. Am I remembering that date right?
That's correct. That's correct.
So was that well, let me come back to the safety issue. You mentioned a record production out of the Gulf of Mexico. So how important is a hydrocarbon production from the Gulf of Mexico for the U.S. as a whole?
Well, today it represents about 15% of America's oil portfolio. So obviously very, very important. And although we have four oceans in America, the Arctic, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Gulf, 98% of that 15% comes from the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico is the smallest geographically of those four oceans, but it is a whopper when it comes to production for this country. And I would go back, Robert, and say that after 1973, after the Arab oil embargo, the Gulf of Mexico was one of those provinces that really went to work to help get America from being such an energy dependent province to where we've come from since then. And the Gulf has drilled more wells, more production, great opportunities there. And folks, the men and women who work in the Gulf of Mexico often sound like me with this Cajun accent. They're proud of what they do. And there are faces to these places.
Faces to these places. I like that. So why is the Gulf, it's gone in and out of favor, right, among people who are looking for hydrocarbons? And in the last few years, I've noticed a lot of foreign companies have come into the Gulf of Mexico, Petrobras, others that are seeing the opportunity there. Why is the Gulf of Mexico such an attractive place for drillers, domestic or foreign drillers? Why do they want to come into the Gulf of Mexico?
Well, the number one reason is got great rocks, great geology. We've been blessed with great geology in the Gulf of Mexico, wells that produce tremendous amounts of volumes. Again, not for everybody. Deep water, we only have 68 deep water facilities. Let me kind of go back and reset some of those metrics for you. When I said that we have 15% of our nation's oil comes from offshore, comes from the Gulf of Mexico, I should say. And of that 15%, 98% of that comes from deep water. We only have 68 deep water facilities in all of the Gulf of Mexico. And so deep water is not just for anybody. You got to have a strong balance sheet. You got to have some staying power. You got to have some management. And you got to have the ability to kind of go through the cycles. As we know, it's a world commodity. Oil is a world commodity, often impacted by events across the globe. And you got to have a balance sheet to be able to handle those cycles.
Well, so when you say that, I remember because I've followed Texas oil and gas production and overall energy production in the U.S. The first offshore well was if memory serves, Kerr-McGee, and something like 12 or 14 feet of water. I mean, these were the initial growth in the Gulf of Mexico was in very shallow water, and it was baby steps, and now we're in water depths of what are the deepest of the deep water?
10,000 feet of water. Yeah, it's incredible. We've gone from that first well, Kerr-McGee drill, where you actually would walk on a boardwalk, if you would, to the facility from the beach. So incredible. And we've now drilled probably about 60,000 wells in the Outer Continental Shelf of the Gulf of Mexico. About 50,000 of those wells would be in what we would call shallow water, 660 meters of water depth or less, and then another 6,000 to 8,000 perhaps beyond that. Two different provinces, Robert, really, really important to understand. Shallow water, been around since 1947, deep water since 1974. One is primarily oil, one is primarily gas. One has, again, 50,000 wells so drilled, one maybe 7,000 or so wells drilled. So radically different in terms of, although one body of water, really two separate provinces.
Well, so what is considered deep water, and then what are the depths of the deepest wells now that are operating?
Yeah, so we use a variety of things. And I would say, for purpose of this conversation, 200 meters or less would be shallow water. So we're talking about 660 or so feet of water depth. I've seen different things that we use occasionally 1,000 feet. But I would share with you, for purposes of what I'm talking about, 200 meters or less would be shallow water. And we're now drilling wells in water depths of 10,000 feet. So incredible technology. The most challenging thing we do environmentally in this country, engineering, the most challenging engineering thing we do is space exploration. The second most challenging thing we do is deep water exploration.
Well, so 10,000 feet of water depth, and then the drill string, once it gets to the mud, then goes down how much further?
Well, you got another 28,000, 30,000 feet or so. So again, depending upon the targeted reservoir, you're talking about sometimes well bores that may be equivalent of 5 or 6 miles of well bore below the mud line.
And you mentioned the difference between the shallow water versus the deep water, but the deep water and the subsalt plays, right? Are those mostly liquid hydrocarbons, or is that gas?
Yeah, that's where you're going to find your liquid hydrocarbons. Just tremendous oil plays there, subsalt. We've been very blessed, and as a believer in natural resources, I think we have a duty and an obligation to manage all of our resources in a manner that can help improve the quality of our life. So it's not an either-or equation for Louisiana. I certainly brought that mentality to the Department of Interior. It's not an either-or equation. And what I mean by that, Robert, we shouldn't focus on either being safe or environmentally sustainable or have good production. We proved you can do it all. Again, in 2019, those numbers are pretty reflective of all of the above approach. We can have it all. And look, when you take a look at even the marine life in the Gulf of Mexico is absolutely incredible. The fishing opportunity is absolutely incredible. And you would be pleased to know that the data that I reflected upon is that at least since 2017, we haven't had a single marine mammal or sea turtle fatality from exploration and production activities. Again, a long time ago, we were I don't think that there were folks who was as respectful of the marine life as we are today. And we're proving every day that we not only care about the human life, but we equally care about the marine life.
Well, so I've thought about getting this to this point a little bit later, but I want to pose it now because you've done your whole career in the oil and gas business. If I remember right, you got your degree in petroleum as a petroleum landman from
petroleum land management. Yes, spent some time in local government. So not 100% of my career was in oil and gas, but a good part of it. Yes, sir.
Right. Well, so here's the quick question. Why is Louisiana so different from the rest of the U.S.? And I say that as I was there a couple of months ago, and I've been to New Orleans several times, but it's the vibe, the way people talk, the cuisine is different. What did you're a Cajun. How do you see this?
Well, let's go back to Tennessee Williams' T-shirt or quote. I saw a T-shirt recently, and he said that there are 3 American cities, and he talked about San Francisco, New York, and New Orleans, and he said everywhere else is Cleveland. So that's a Tennessee Williams.
Everywhere else is Cleveland?
Right. That's not my quote. That's Tennessee Williams. Okay. Let me say that the great state of Louisiana prides itself on being unique. And we have to understand how we became, a state in the first place and who we were settled by. We the only state in the union that came in as a result of, first of all, being French, right? And so there's a huge French influence here. There's a huge Spanish influence here, because at one time we were under Spanish control, before that under French control. And so there's just a lot of different things going on. You get a huge, great African-American community here. And it is really this whole so-called gumbo of people, right? It is this gumbo of people. And there are really not a whole lot of economic opportunities, I think, that happened maybe prior to, say, 1930, 1940. But this was all agriculture. And then along comes the oil and gas industry and started creating some wealth here. So people really embrace the industry. They want to do it the right way. And we kind of pride ourselves on being a little different. It doesn't mean we're not committed to excellence. It doesn't mean that we don't want the same great things that other folks across the country want. It just means that, we proud of the vibe that we have. We proud of that difference. We embrace it. You hear it in our voice. You enjoy it at our dinner table. And when we bring you out to the dance hall, you have a hard time keeping up with us.
So when I know friends of mine who are from south of US 90, what do they call it? The south of US 90 is down the bayou and north is what is it, down the bayou and everywhere else? How does that break down, that geographic breakdown?
Well, actually, so Highway 90 is kind of that one of those dividers, but Louisiana Highway 1, when you get south of the Intracoastal Canal on Highway 1, you down the bayou. When you north of the Intracoastal Canal, you up the bayou. And when you on this side of the bayou, or you're on the other side of the bayou. So up the bayou, down the bayou, this side, the other side. And so that's Bayou de Fouche we're talking about. Bayou de Fouche, a very, very prominent bayou that at one point in time was connected to the Mississippi River in Donaldsonville, and actually goes all the way through Port Fourchon, which is the world's largest energy port on the planet.
Well, let's talk about Port Fourchon, because in September I was in Terrebonne Parish, and I know in talking with some people who work for Schwest that Port Fourchon, got almost destroyed by Hurricane Ida. What's the latest? I'll ask it this way. How has the latest hurricane affected the ability of the offshore industry to get all the things it needs? What from soap to dope, all of the things that were going out of Port Fourchon. What's happened now? Yeah,
a lot of resilience here. So certainly a punch, but not a knockout punch. I was speaking to Chet Chasson actually last week, who is the port director there. Said they're probably about 60 or 70% of the way back. Folks know how to deal with it. Let me say, however, that this was a substantial storm that had a lot of physical impact. And people do what people do here. This is a way of life, and while it's tough, you don't ever give up. And so, yeah, you can count on Port Fourchon to after Katrina obviously came back, and then of course after Ida here, still doing what it does for this great country.
So as you talked about Louisiana, one of the things that popped in my head is this idea of the divide, the urban-rural divide. People who live in big cities, and then the people who live in the countryside or in rural areas, and they produce the food and fuel and the fiber that then go into the cities. But it seems to me Louisiana has an even kind of the idea of being a producer, particularly of food and fiber and fuel. It's really is a natural resource state, and it's both its blessing and its curse. I mean, because Louisiana is famous for a lot of things. One of them is let's call it what it is: political corruption and kind of dominance of state politics by oil and gas. And I'm not purposely being provocative here, but how do you see that in terms of the fishing, the oil and gas? I mean, they're in conflict sometimes, but it's a natural resource state, which really it boldly so more than any other state in the South that I can think of at the moment. But how does that play out in the identity of the state?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, let's make it very clear. Louisiana does not have a monopoly on political corruption. Okay.
Well, I'm from Oklahoma, so I'm right there with you.
While we may have had our share of bad days, we too believe in doing the right thing. Occasionally, we'll have a leader that will take us in the wrong spot, but every zip code in America has those issues, and so we don't have a monopoly on that. When it comes to natural resources, there's no doubt, and it's not just oil and gas. It is certainly our agriculture is unbelievable here, our food, our fisheries. And Louisiana is organized a little different. Our Constitution says that we can only have 20 executive departments. And when you take a look at the number of executive departments we have 4 that are put together specifically around resource management. So you have a separate Department of Environmental Quality. You have a separate Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. You have a separate Department of Natural Resources. And you have a separate Department of Agriculture and Forestry. Those are 4 resource agencies of 20 total agencies in the state. That ought to give your viewers, I think, a little flavor for how important we believe resource management here is. In a lot of places, you put all that together under a Department of Natural Resources. We don't do that here in Louisiana. We think these things are so important that we want a focus on Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, different from a Department of Environmental Quality, different from forestry, and different from oil and gas, which is primarily the natural resource agency here in Louisiana.
So you mentioned it yourself. You've been in politics at the local level. You were elected at a young age, 25, if I remember correctly, to elected office in what parish was that?
That was St. Martin Parish.
St. Martin Parish, which is just south of New Orleans?
Well, it would be east of New Orleans,
okay,
and contiguous to Lafayette Parish. I'm sorry, west of New Orleans. I'm sorry.
Okay. So what's changed? You started as a landman. And I'm asking specifically about what's changed. I mentioned your political career, but what's changed in the oil and gas industry over that time? Now, your career, some 30 some odd years, right? How has the industry itself changed? And then second question is, you were in the Trump administration. Did you expect these massive changes at the federal level under the Biden administration? But let's take those at the first question first. How's the oil and gas industry changed over that time period?
Well, again, here in Louisiana, we certainly had a situation where you could have mom and pop type energy companies, if you would, companies maybe of a geologist, an engineer, a small staff, drilling a few wells and actually making a pretty good living on a small amount of barrels of production. That has changed with the whole regulatory world over the last 15 to 20 years, where there's just not enough scale, much like with banks and much like with insurance companies or much like with retail. You had to grow in order to be able to survive in a changing world. So that has happened. We don't have as many mom and pop type oil and gas companies, if you would. And that's a shame, because these folks certainly have been the backbone for a long time of many of our communities. But that's the evolution of business. It happens everywhere. You see it in your hometown. We see it here as well. The other thing I would share with you is that it's my appreciation that folks who make a living finding oil and gas for our great country have been mislabeled. I believe the folks that I know that find oil and gas, or either explore for it, produce it, transport it, refine it, process it, they love and enjoy an afternoon on the beach, a day at the lake, a walk in the park, green grass and clean air, as much as any other group of people out there, as many as any other group of occupations. So I think what has happened is that folks are beginning to wake up to the idea is that they've got to do a better job of telling their story. And one of the things that I want to do, one of my efforts, is to help energy workers tell their story and have them share their involvement with their interaction with the environment. Look, I think that, we've all had challenges. Every generation has its challenge. A challenge, I'm not saying the challenge, but a challenge of our generation is to seek to improve the environment without wrecking the economy. We've had 6 recessions in 1973 in this country. And each one of those recessions have been preceded by a spike in energy prices. As goes our access to affordable energy in this country, so goes our economic performance. When we have flat, predictable energy prices, we build and sell more cars. We build and sell more houses. Retail is stronger. Leisure is stronger. Restaurants are stronger. And the facts are not debatable that from 1973 to 2019, we've had these 6 recessions. And they've all been preceded by a spike in energy prices. And I, for one, you can put me in the category that I believe we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we have a clean and vibrant and sustainable environment, but also put me in the category that believes we're going to do the things that we can to make sure that we have a sustainable economy. Robert, somewhere along the line, there was a meeting. I don't know, maybe you went to this meeting, but somebody went to a meeting and said, the red states are going to be about energy and the blue states are going to be about environment. Those are the 2 E's. And I'm saying, no, there's a third E. And it's purple. It's not red and it's not blue. It's a purple E and it's called economy. And we need to make sure that those 3 E's of environment, energy, and economy are in balance with one another, because it reminds me of the 3-legged bar stool. If one leg goes a little shorter than the others, we know what happens. And we're kind of beginning to sense some of that right now, with these incredibly unaffordable energy prices that we're experiencing in this country, more so because we're out of balance on how we're trying to approach the problem. It seems like to me, it's like squeezing a water balloon. As a kid, when you squeeze a water balloon, you don't get rid of the water, you just move it from one side to the other. And so I think that there's a water balloon out there for our national policy. One of them is represented by the economy, one of them represented by energy, and one of them represented by the environment. And it seems like what's going on today is that we're just squeezing things rather than having a plan. And I'm hopeful that it's not too late, that we can have a course correction. It's been odd to me to see from January of this year, we went from, oh no, meaning we were going to pause leasing on federal lands and waters. And we went from, oh no, to OPEC, right? We went from, oh no, in January 2021 to by summer 2021, we were calling on OPEC. And if you go to the gas pump in October 2021 or now today, November, in maybe 9-10 months, we've gone from, oh no, to OPEC to oh shit. That's what people are experiencing right now at the gas pump. That's the kind of moment we have. And for the president, and again, I'm not being critical of the person, but of the policies, Robert, can you imagine that the Gulf of Mexico has some of the most climate advantaged production on the planet? And rather than calling for more Gulf of Mexico production, we go to OPEC? That's just ridiculous.
Well, let me ask about that, because that's one of the things that it looks like what's happening in Europe today is providing a lesson to the United States about what not to do. But
absolutely.
But I agree with you in terms of the oil price, that it's clear that recessions are often triggered or immediately follow oil price spikes. So, but I know you served in the Trump administration. I want to ask about that, but to what extent can you, and I'm going to ask you plainly, that you can point the high oil price at the Biden administration? Is because that they're trying to limit drilling, or is this just the snapback of the economy and overall not enough supply globally?
Well, this is a self-inflicted wound. This is a supply problem that we have in this country. We vilify producers. We vilify producers in a way that we haven't vilified an industry since the days of prohibition. And when you vilify an industry, capital is going to be withdrawn. there is such an underinvestment in the oil and gas exploration business right now in this country. So we're basically said to our own producers, we don't want it. You don't spend any money. Don't drill any more wells. We don't want to lease anything. And then we run across to OPEC and say, no, we want y'all to do it. Think for a second, Robert, if we were starving here, if food prices were going up, if grain prices were going up, imagine we would say, no, we don't want Nebraska and Kansas to farm, Iowa to farm. We're saying no to y'all, but we're gonna go somewhere else to get, to feed our population. It doesn't make sense, especially when the facts and the science say that the Gulf of Mexico has the second best performing carbon intensity production in all the world.
Well, so let me jump back here about the Trump administration and what your work there. What was it like? I'll ask the general question first. So there was a lot of controversy around Interior with Secretary Zinke, who was from all appearances was forced out. What was it like working you hadn't worked in Washington before, right? You'd been in Louisiana your whole career. What was that like, and what was it like being inside the Trump administration?
Well, you see, I went to Washington to do a job. I was a tour of duty for me. It was my understanding that that the offshore sector needed a champion. And so my experience in Washington is probably different from most people that went to Washington. I lived a block and a half away from the White House. I walked to work every day. I worked 7 days a week when I was in Washington. I did not go to a single party while I was in Washington. And I stayed focused on my portfolio, doing what the American people paid me to do. So for me, the experience was great. I was totally focused on my own portfolio, doing the great work of advancing safety, advancing environmental sustainability, and thinking that we could advance production simultaneously. And we did. So for me, it was a great experience because I was totally focused on my portfolio.
So are you surprised? I mean, you mentioned the Biden administration, and I don't consider myself a partisan. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm disgusted. But I mean, I knew the Biden administration was going to be different. Did you expect that their agenda would be as anti-hydrocarbon as it is? Because I mean, it is. I mean, or even look at the congressional hearing recently where they called the heads of the oil and gas companies up on the carpet to say, well, why are you not singing from our tune on on climate change? I mean, it's the change in the American the leadership both in Congress and in the Biden administration. I mean, it's been enormous. Well, it's just a huge change from what it was under Trump. You've been watching politics a long time. Did you expect it to be this radical? I'll put it that way.
Well, I think that climate change was on the ballot. I think that was one of the things that was on the ballot. So, yeah, I certainly expected that there would be some change. The part that I'm a little surprised by, that the change is not supported by science when we're talking about offshore. So specifically talking about offshore, I mean, I understand that politics often drives policy. I get that. But I also believe that when you're talking about making big policy decisions, you inform yourself with the facts, and the science matters. And in this particular situation, the thing that has been surprising is, again, that we would turn to OPEC instead of folks here in America. That's surprising to me. What also has surprised me is that I saw where the Department of Energy last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, important, and I think you shared this with your viewers, the Department of Energy came out under the Biden administration and concluded that oil and natural gas was going to be a big part of our energy complex for a long time. Now, I think many of us who believe that we are in an energy transition phase for America fundamentally believe that we have to do this in a balanced way. Folks, I think, were kind of hijacking the conversation and saying, no, we need to do it tomorrow. We need to get it done tomorrow. It's not possible to do it tomorrow, but don't take my word for it. The Department of Energy career employees just put out a report that clearly indicate and concluded with what many have said before. So what I'm surprised is that they're not listening to those experts and then continuing on. I saw recently where the White House or the president basically said here that more oil production is not inconsistent with climate change improvements. That was a statement he made over the weekend.
Okay.
I'm happy to share it with you.
Okay.
I'll email it to you after the program.
Sure.
And so what we are saying here, folks who understand that our children are going to have access to energy sources far different from only what we had, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But we need to do it taking a page out of a lesson learned from the Europeans. We need to have a plan. It shouldn't be a water balloon. We shouldn't squeeze one thing and let the water go somewhere else. And then, oh, that didn't work. Start squeezing it somewhere else. So what I've been surprised about is the inconsistency, the incompetence, and I mean, sticking a middle finger at the workers of the USA energy workers is disheartening. It's, Robin, you've never heard something called USA warming. You've heard of something called global warming.
Right.
So tell me, my friend, when we look at this and you ask the question about what we think is surprising, isn't it surprising that we would say, okay, we need more energy to fuel our great country. Maybe we'll work on this energy transition. And while we need it, let's go get it where it's less climate advantage. It's difficult for folks to understand that that's not a nefarious motive at play, because it doesn't make sense. You've never heard the phrase USA warming. So why would we go to OPEC and beg them to give us more production rather than going to the Gulf of Mexico or the Permian or some of those other places where we have climate advantage production?
So let me shift gears here a little bit. And by the way, so my guest is Scott Angelle. He's you can find out more about him at usaenergyworkers.com, which is a new website that you're putting up to talk about energy workers in America. Is that right?
Yeah, look, we need to stand with our energy workers, and not just traditional energy workers, all forms of energy workers. We need to rally around our energy workers. Our energy workers often do the work when they kiss their families goodbye, putting on their hard hats and their steel-toe boots that we don't want to do. And we have the luxuries of a climate-controlled home. I like to say, if you can read, thank a teacher. If you can read at night in a climate-controlled home, thank a teacher and a USA energy worker.
And that's the goal of your website, is to just bring those people, as you say, in the hard hats and steel toe boots to their voices more to the conversation. Is that the goal?
Yeah. And I think in addition to that is we'll have a place for, folks to sign a petition. Just again, asking our local, state and federal leaders to work together in a balanced approach as we are into this energy transition phase of the planet, that we have a balanced approach, that we don't wreck the economy while we're trying to improve the environment. And there's a way to do that. I mean, again, if we had more, not less, oil and gas production today, Robin, we could improve the quality and the health of Mother Earth today if we had more production from the Gulf of Mexico and less from Venezuela.
So let me ask about offshore production, because one of the big pushes that the Biden administration has been making is for offshore wind. And so I've written about this a fair amount. And the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which I guess is a parallel agency under Department of Interior to where you work, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. So they had estimated recently that about 22 gigawatts of offshore wind could be developed in the Atlantic Ocean. Well, you assume 3.5 megawatts, 3.6 megawatts. We're talking about 6,000 offshore platforms in the Atlantic just for the wind business. And there was something like 1,900 platforms in the entire Gulf of Mexico. Let me ask the question, is it feasible that there would be that many offshore platforms built in the Atlantic or anywhere else in a reasonable time frame? It seems like a stretch to believe that we could even get that many permitted, given all the issues around offshore development, the ocean floor, migratory mammals, marine mammals, et cetera. How do you see just the sheer number of platforms that are being proposed here?
It's not the answer to everything, but it's certainly, as a policymaker that does embrace all of the above, I think it can be part of the solution. Certainly, there's going to be a limit on the number of facilities that you can have in a certain density. You got the fisheries issues you have to worry about and the shipping issues. So all those are going to come to play, but we ought not be defeatist. We ought not say, well, it's going to be too hard. I mean, think of the oil and gas industry. I mean, it has been really difficult, but yet, when you unleash the innovation, the inspiration, and the dedication of American workers, you get some incredible results. So, no, I don't believe that offshore wind energy is the panacea, the end-all, be-all, but I certainly believe it can add to the portfolio as solar can.
Well, fair enough. But I'm just asking about the scale, because it took decades to build 1,900 platforms in the Gulf of Mexico. And now the goals are in just a couple of decades to put in 6,000 offshore platforms just for the wind business. My question is it even feasible that they could do that, given your experience in offshore?
Yeah, I'm not in the business of predicting feasibility of the market. But what I can say is that those are substantial challenges. There are substantial environmental challenges. There are substantial permitting challenges. And so, whether it's feasible or not remains to be seen. Capital will go where capital can get permits and get a return on its investment. And when capital is no longer able to get permits and capital can no longer get a return on investment, then it'll stop seeking those opportunities.
Well, so let's talk about capital then, because I'm glad you did. So one of the issues that's been key for oil and gas drilling in the U.S. now is lack of capital and the demand from investors that the oil and gas industry live within its means, that they don't overspend as they did during the heyday of the shale revolution, and $300 billion was essentially burned up, making oil and gas a lot cheaper. But now, and when I talk to people in the industry, they're saying, look, prices have gone up, inflation for drilling, everything, the prices have all gone up. What do you see? I mean, I'll ask the question this way. Is the industry responding to higher prices with more drilling? Do you see an increase in activity offshore now due to oil at 80 and nat gas in excess of 5?
I see offshore a willingness to do more, to take advantage of the opportunities. Certainly, we're seeing rig counts go up in America onshore. Okay,
but only a little bit, right? I mean,
just a little bit, and part of that is because the host nation is vilifying the expenditure of that capital. Think of it as the investment of billions of dollars that has a period of time before you can recover your investment, and you're hearing about all of this negativity towards the industry. And it's like, this is not stuff you turn the switch on and off. It takes the expenditure capital. It takes a lot of money. It takes being able to ride ups and downs. But stop for a second, Robert. This is important to get that while we are saying that, while the country at the highest levels is vilifying producers, and on one hand, in January, saying, no, we're pausing leasing, we don't want this anymore. By summertime, we go into OPEC. And then I saw an article that came out recently, again, by World Oil. I'm happy to send it to you, that the State Department, the headlines and said that we are instructing domestic oil producers to produce more. So there's a reason that capital is not gone. Capital goes where capital is treated well. Capital goes where capital has an opportunity for a return on investment. And if we vilify it and we continue to vilify it, and we've even made it harder for banks, not the people actually drilling the well, but for the people loaning the money to drill the well. We're talking about SEC reporting requirements, banks having to disclose all this information. That's all designed to vilify the production of a domestic barrel while prices go up and we go across to the Middle East and we get on our knees and we beg people to give us production because $4 gas starts to get uncomfortable politically.
So let me ask you about this. Look, you've been in politics a long time. You were in Washington for a long time. What's this really about? I mean, in your view, I have my own opinions about what's really at play here. But this, as you've made this point now several times in this last 30 or 40 minutes we've been talking, the vilification of the industry. What's driving this?
Well, it appears to me there is a sincere desire by a group of leaders who are interested in solving some of the issues associated that the Paris Accord has brought up, the climate change and global warming. I take them at their word for their motive there. I disagree with their actions. And so I then have to then start maybe rethinking what the motive is. Because again, and don't take my word for it. Let me give you another example. In 2016, in November 2016, BOEM, you talked about the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Right. In 2016, BOEM issued a report under the Obama-Biden administration. And they concluded in 2016 that not having a lease sale in the Gulf of Mexico would lead to greater greenhouse gases because supply would be substituted from a foreign source. Bingo. Stop and think about it.
And those and to hit on your point earlier, you're saying that the foreign sources of production are more carbon intensive than production in the Gulf of Mexico. You're
exactly.
saying that, yeah.
So it wasn't the Trump administration or some right-wing folk that concluded that. It was folks who were working in the Obama Biden administration. They concluded, put it out in a federal document. I'm happy to get it to you. And in that document, they said that if we don't have a lease sale, we're going to have higher greenhouse gas emissions because we're going to substitute for foreign production. Well, then we get to January of 2021, and the first thing we do, or one of the first things we do, is we pause lease sales on public waters.
And that was one of the first things the Biden administration has done. But is that lease sale now going to happen?
Well, it's scheduled to happen on November the 17th. So 16 days from now, when we're recording this program. Now, having said that, the lease sale happens. And then after the lease sale happens, there are certain processes that have to take place for those leases to be issued. So we're hopeful that not only did the federal judge tell them to go ahead and have a lease sale, but that they understand that the need to get these leases into research, into perhaps exploration wells, in production is very important. Again, why are we going to OPEC? Why are we asking OPEC Plus? Why are we asking Russia to give us the energy to fuel our country? It's just odd to me. Now, Robin, perhaps I would get it if we didn't have it here, or if we had it and it was so inferior here. Maybe it would be worth having a meeting. But I think your viewers are asking the same question. We're having higher prices. And by the way, not just gasoline, right? Gasoline prices are up 50% since the beginning of the year. But natural gas, there are going to be people that are listening to this story, my friend, who this winter, if we have a tough winter, there are going to be people who are listening to this story who have to make a choice between buying medicine or paying for the monthly utility bill. 48% of the electricity in Louisiana, the source product is natural gas. So as natural gas moves up, and again, this is a self-inflicted wound where if we recognize that we're never going to have the cheapest labor on the planet, and we fine with that. That's not who we are. But one of the things that has kept us competitive in this world economy is our innovation, our technology, and our affordable, predictable energy. We're losing that.
So as you say that, one of the things that pops in my head is just to ask you the question. So there's no question hydrocarbons dominate America's primary energy use. They dominate globally. What's your view on nuclear then? We talked a little bit about wind. We haven't talked about nuclear at all. What's your view on nuclear? You have Louisiana. You have 3 nuclear plants in Louisiana. Is that right? 2
for sure, maybe 3, but again, very significant. Very significant. And again, all of the above. All of the above. Let's not put our eggs in just one basket. Nuclear has a place, and it certainly has a place in Louisiana. Provides some very affordable energy here to add to the portfolio of natural gas. We have some coal facilities here as well. So again, this idea that we just have to say no, not in my backyard, is just not an American thing in my mind. I think there's opportunities for us to reach a balance. And again, I'm preaching a balance of the 3 E's, a balance of the 3 E's. Again, somehow, some way, the red states became around energy. The blue states became about environment. And there's a purple E, and it's the economy. And unless we can focus on that as well, then we're going to go down a path, I think, that's going to lead to some implosion of our economy.
Well, it certainly seems like a real possibility because, as you say, high oil prices, high energy prices generally are correlated very well with recessions. So what are you doing now after being out of the federal government? What's your plan? What are you got this website usaenergyworkers.com. What else are you doing? And what's your next what is repositioning, as my friend Peter Osno said?
Yeah. Well, this is my thing. For the longest time while I was in government, I often felt that the energy worker himself or herself did not have a strong enough voice. And I think it's been a mistake because I think we ought to take a page out of the farmers' playbook. When I watch the farmers and the farmers move public policy, we lead with khaki pants and flannel shirts and tractors. America loves farmers. We love people who work outside and sweat and till, as so we should. There's a love affair for folks who do that and produce the food that we need in the fiber. I believe that what has been missing in the equation is that somebody really concerned about the worker. And so my whole process and my whole thoughts right now are to make sure that we are celebrating and elevating the USA energy worker in a way that hasn't happened before. So I'm out there doing my thing and I'm advocating to try to make certain that the points of, and look, I couldn't write the script. I mean, this is unbelievable, Robert, that I'm out there talking about the USA energy worker in February and people are like, yeah, well, whatever. I'm like, oh, we got some really good production. We got some really good, yeah, well, whatever. And I told people, I said, people won't be listening unless energy prices start moving. People won't be listening about balancing and taking care of the economy until prices start moving. So this is what happens, Robert. As prices go down, we get worried about the environment. As prices go up, we get worried about the economy. Well, that's no way to run an organization, right? That's not balance. And so one of the things that I think is missing in the balance of the conversation is the worker. So we're trying to do that, and I'm out there advocating and bringing out points using my experience as the longest serving director in the history of the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, having had the opportunity to serve as lieutenant governor, having had the opportunity to serve as secretary of natural resources and in local government as an elected parish president. I think I get it. I think people are concerned. And absolutely, I want a clean environment. I absolutely do. I just happen to believe that both are possible. A clean environment, a sustainable environment, and a strong economy by affordable energy prices. I think those things can happen together.
You going to run for office again?
Look, I'm running away.
Running away from what?
I got 10 acres of grass, and I'm running away from the lawnmower right now. But look,
because I got to tell you, when you made your points, and I'm on board with you, but you sound like you're getting ready to jump on the stump there because you got the lines ready to go. I'm just telling you straight.
No. If you run into me in the fifth row. On Sunday church, the fifth pew on Sunday church, you gonna get the same, Scott. You gonna get this all the time. This for me. Look, I don't have a note in front of me. I don't have a single note in front of me. I'm just giving you what's on my heart. That I believe. I really do believe, Robert, that after World War II, one of the single reasons that we were able to become the world's first superpower was affordable energy. I really, really believe that. I believe that in my heart. I
agree with you. The Rural Electrification Act of 1939 or 1936 changed America and right. Set the table after World War II. Just changed the complexion and the economy of the country forever.
The Eisenhower Interstate System,
yeah,
the biggest economic development project in the history of the globe, allows us to live in the places we don't work. It just is incredible. And so I believe in energy, and so I'm just going to be out there and telling my story with the facts, just with the facts. It's like Captain Joe Friday, just the facts, man.
Now there's a reach into the past.
Yeah,
Bill Gannon and Joe Friday. That's right.
good stuff. Good stuff.
So what about? Let me ask you about inflation in the oil and gas industry, because I've talked to several people in the drilling sector recently, and they're not drilling, even though their prices are up. But one of the things they say, the reason that's holding them back is increased costs. Now, price of energy itself is up, but the price of producing energy appears to be going up for labor, mud, all these other things. What do you hear about that? What do you know about those rising prices just in terms of making drilling happen?
Yeah, well, I'm not aware of anybody that's not investing in the drill bit because of rising costs. I mean, obviously, as the price of the commodity goes up, there's going to be a reaction. Prices have been depressed for a while in the service sector, so it's only natural that as we go from where we were to where we are now, you would see some adjustments. I'm seeing it everywhere as far as that, but I'm not aware of anybody who is, and it may be, but I'm just not aware of anybody who is not investing in the drill bit because prices are going up. What I do believe, however, is that I'm aware of is people are fearful that one day their government wakes up and says, we don't want it from you anymore, but we'll go get it from somewhere else. And there are a lot of towns here in this area, that you may or may not be familiar with, but I would say we ought to put Abbeville before Algeria. We ought to put Lake Arthur and Lake Charles and Lafayette and Larose over Libya. We ought to put Kaplan over Kuwait. There are great opportunities for us to do it. So people are like, why would I go invest? Why would I go invest when I could have a stranded investment here when the government with one stroke of the pen might do something to shut us down? And don't think it can't happen.
Let me ask you about that, because I was talking with a guy, this is several weeks ago, but he was invested in offshore in the Gulf of Mexico and in Mexico. And he was talking about the fact that now, kind of out of nowhere, I mean, you assume political risk is in, banana republics, but
right.
What we talked about, we haven't used the words political risk in the United States for investment in the upstream. And is that political risk increasing or decreasing?
Well, it's at an apex right now. I mean, it's vilification, it's hostility. Okay, it's hostility that's being projected, and it is showing up in different ways. It's showing up. Look, stockholders have a right. Stockholders as owners have a right to what it is that they want with the companies that they own. I get that. I support. That's what owners want to do. But when the government is adopting and projecting these vile things towards this industry, but then saying, "Well, we still need it," and oh, by the way, the Department of Energy saying that not only do we still need it, it's going to be part of our energy complex for a long time. And that wasn't Robert Koch that issued that report. This is the Department of Energy 2 weeks ago. So right. If we're gonna need it, it's like that old TV commercial over here, Robert, where I was a little radio commercial, and it was about a guy selling tires, and he said he had the cheapest tires in town. And if he said you already got bad tires, why drive all over town looking for good tires if you already got bad tires? So in the meantime, it was effective, right? In the meantime, if we know we have climate advantage production here in America, whether again it's in the Permian or whether it's in the Gulf of Mexico, why are we going to OPEC? Seriously. Because the molecules or the carbon emission that affects climate change, according to the experts, it's called global warming. So, right. I mean, you tell me, I can't figure this one out. And I'm not sure anybody can figure it out. Why are we going to foreign producers to produce what we have better in this country?
So we've been talking about an hour. Again, my guest is Scott Angelle. He's you can find more about him at usaenergyworkers.com. So Scott, I ask all my guests, I ask them to introduce themselves. I also ask them a couple of other questions. What gives you hope?
Actually, what gives me hope is that the American spirit is undefeated. And we've had our share. This country's had a share of dark moments. But the American hope is undefeated. The American workers undefeated. I'm betting on my American workers.
Last question then. What are you reading? I like to ask people about what books they're reading. What are you reading these days?
actually, right now, the only thing I'm reading are things that are coming out of Congress and the United States government, because trying to make sure that I can catch things that I think perhaps are maybe aiming high but missing wide. So I'm doing most of my reading.
So have you read the Build Back Better Act? Is what 1,900 pages? Have you read that one? Because that's a big honking document.
I haven't got through it all, but that's what I kind of go through to try to make sure that Build Back Better actually means Build Back Better, right? Just because you call it that doesn't mean it's so, right? And I want to build back better. I mean, I absolutely want to build back better. But we can't build back better if we don't have access to affordable energy. And we can't build back better if we don't have access to affordable energy that's homegrown, produced by domestic workers who are paying taxes. And Robert, let me make a connection to our friends in the Rockies. So one of the things that happened last year was that Congress adopted the Great American Outdoors Act. The Great American Outdoors Act is viewed as the most robust bipartisan conservation legislation over 50 years. And what happens in that Great American Outdoors Act is we take a portion of the royalties that are generated from offshore and we put it into conservation. And by and large, the conservation efforts that we have in this country are in our Western states, because that's where the holdings of the American government is.
Right.
And so whether you in Colorado or you in Montana or you in Wyoming or you in New Mexico or wherever you may be, those monies that we produce in the Gulf of Mexico, those royalties, are many of them are dedicated, legislatively dedicated as just a pure set aside. They don't have to be appropriated. They just set aside to fund restoration in our parks and our trails and those kind of things. So we like to think that for every dollar that we produce, not only are we helping to pay for the government, but some of that money is going to help pay for the activities or the maintenance, if you would, of going on in our parks. So we're connected in the gas, at the gas pump to the Gulf of Mexico in ways that perhaps we don't often think. We need to do a better job of that. Again, when we get oil from OPEC, by the way, no money goes to the Great American Outdoors Act. When we get money from OPEC, by the way, no money goes to fund coastal restoration. When we get oil from OPEC, no money goes to fund Land and Water Conservation Act. There is a connection here. We can do a better job. We need to lower the temperature and seek balance as opposed to the thinking of the next election instead of the next generation.
Well, I think that's a good summary for what we've been talking about. So my guest again, Scott Angelle. Scott, thanks a million for being on the Power Hungry podcast. And to all of you out in podcast land, thanks for tuning in. Tune in for the next episode of the Power Hungry podcast. Until then, see ya.